program is a completely uncensored examination of current topics in the law. Today's subject, employer beware, interviewing do's and don'ts. That's right, this is your favorite talk show. This Law is Live.
Hi, welcome to This Law is Live. I am your host, Lenny Lotzala. Today's special guest is law professor Bobby Bonehead. How are you, Bobby?
Great.
Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Well, then, as usual, you, our guest, are in charge.
Well, audience, in today's hypothetical scenario, I play the part of the employer. And I'm going to interview a young lady, a potential employee who we've given the name Anita Job. For each question in our job interview, Anita will furnish us either a do or a don't. That is, for each question, she'll indicate either A-OK or no way.
But hold on, Bobby, we've got a surprise for you. The role of Anita Job will be played by one of your former students who failed your class and then took you to court for all you had in a successful malpractice lawsuit. That's right, it's Veronica Vindictive, whom, ironically enough, through your incompetence, inspired to go to law school and set things right.
But this is uncalled for. You never said anything.
What do you say, studio audience and all of you millions of people out there watching our show? Let's all play along. Let's all find out what employers can or cannot ask legally their job applicants. Take it away, Bobby, my friend.
All right, job applicant. Let's start the interview. Question 1. What is your full name, miss? My golly, Anita, can't make up your mind, eh? Well, I know that you always like to have it both ways. In this case, actually, there's a little bit of sense you might have in actually not answering it either way. In one sense, asking for an applicant's full name is, of course, fine. But on the other hand, for an interviewer or an application to use the term miss may be considered an inquiry about marital status, and that is not allowed.
You're overlooking something, though, Professor Bonehead. See, you could ask me whether my spouse or any other relatives are employed by this company, which obviously might reveal my marital status, but it's perfectly okay under company policy regarding nepotism. You never told us this in class. Did you know that?
I know what nepotism is. Remember, Anita, you don't get any extra points for embellishing your answers. Just say yes or no. No essays, no quibbles. This is just like the tests at all your finer universities. Simply multiple choice and or true false. Nothing more, okay? Got it? Question 2. Where were you born?
No way. Potential discrimination based on national origin.
Question 3. Are you a U.S. citizen?
A-okay. But see, I advise you not to ask this question during the interviews, but once an applicant has already been hired. Now, I know you tend to forget things, so don't forget to ask this question later, though, because it is important for immigration and for visa and work permit purposes.
Don't you forget to just say yes or no, okay? Question 4. How long have you lived in Florida?
A-okay.
Nothing else? Good. Question 5. When were you born?
No way.
6. Are you of the legal age?
Potential age discrimination.
Employment, such as at least age 18.
A-okay.
How tall are you?
No way. Could lead to Title VII adverse impact claims or Americans with Disabilities Act claims.
How much do you weigh?
No way. Same reason as for height.
Question 9. In what languages are you fluent?
A-okay.
Well,
but don't ask me how I learned those foreign languages, because that could lead to potential discrimination based on national origin.
And they say professors can't shut up. Number 10. Tell me all about your academic and work experience.
No way.
Aha! You're wrong! There's nothing bad about asking an applicant about his schooling and his previous jobs. That's obviously something which is quite significant in the process of hiring someone. This is such a simple question. I couldn't believe even you, Anita, would miss that one. Question 11. Have you ever been arrested? And not just in your own development. I'm talking about by the police.
No way.
12. Have you ever been convicted of a felony?
A-okay.
Yep, that's right. There's a big difference between felony convictions and simply being arrested. Usually, unless you're being hired for a law enforcement agency, you cannot be asked about simply arrests. Only for law enforcement officers is an arrest record without even a conviction deemed relevant.
Yeah.
Okay. One more question, Anita. In what organizations are you an officer or member?
You worded that question wrong. Because, see, you left it open for me to reveal anything that might determine my race, my color, my national or religious background. Let's just say that I am free to leave out of my answer any of these protected groups.
Well, that's it for our interview, Anita. I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been talking to you, meeting you.
Wait a minute, Professor Bonehead.
We'll get back to you real soon, I'm sure.
See, these interviews are supposed to be a two-way street, remember?
Yeah?
Well, I have some questions for you.
This is highly irregular.
Oh, come on, keep the role play alive.
Lenny?
I say we go along with it. Shoot him down, Anita.
Thank you. First of all, what are these companies' immediate and long-term goals?
Well, that's hard to say.
With whom will I be working?
Well, it depends.
Can I have a copy of the job description?
The very moment we get around to writing one.
Do you have a performance appraisal system?
Not really.
What are my chances for advancement?
Well, look, why don't we talk about that if and when we hire you?
Do you offer training programs?
I don't know.
You don't know anything.
Well, let me get back to you on that, okay?
Wait a minute. You came completely unprepared to this interview. I missed only one of your questions. You missed all 6 of mine. Couldn't even give me an answer. What kind of incompetent are you? And what kind of company would hire someone like you? I wouldn't work for a company like that. Maybe, if you're lucky, I'll get back to you. Goodbye.
Set me up. I've been mistreated. I'm under a lot of stress. And then that horrible, vindictive woman came in here. I was never prepared, but the money wasn't enough for something like this. How could I be treated like this? And it's so horrible. You don't want your sympathy. I want to just.
There are a lot of questions and problems associated with the whole employment interview process, and it really is a somewhat nebulous, difficult area of the law. In honor of that, I've worn my magician's or sorcerer's hat in honor of the fact that even the so-called experts, the personnel experts, the employment lawyers, and others, when given quizzes or tests in this area, frequently fail or at least miss a number of questions because it's just so difficult to know the nuances of what can be asked, what can't be asked,
what can be followed up on, what can't be followed up on, what can you do if the employee volunteers certain things versus if the employee or potential employee does not say certain things. It's very, very difficult. There are manuals out there. The main thing I think to know in this area is try to keep abreast of the current law and try to operate in good faith. Part of what I think gets employers in trouble is simply their motives are not necessarily the most pure of motives. And think in terms of on the ethical lines of are the questions you're asking the type that you would feel comfortable asking anyone, regardless of, say, race or sex? Are they the type of question that you could ask a young person or an old person? Are they the type of questions that really make sense, in effect, for all the employees? If they're not, you really better think long and hard before you ask them. Now, in this whole area, there are a lot of extra legal concerns, which I think people should be well aware of. And I'll start with a little story. Perhaps you've heard this one. A woman dies, an executive dies, and she goes to heaven and also to hell. She's sort of visiting both places to see sort of which one she prefers. And she spends a glorious evening in hell. Basically, hell is like this wonderful country club. She, of course, meets up with all her old friends who are already in hell. They're all dressed elegantly. She kisses them on both sides of the cheek. She has a wonderful meal of lobster and steak. She has fine dining and dancing and discovers that the devil himself is actually a very clever, nice guy. And the evening passes by very quickly. Then she spends a day in heaven, and she lounges around on clouds, and she plays the harp, and she has a pretty nice time there in heaven as well. And so she's finally asked by St. Peter, well, you've seen them both. In which one do you want to spend all eternity? She says, well, I feel a little awkward saying this, but frankly, I think I like hell a little bit better than heaven. So she's sent to hell. She gets to hell, and she goes up to the country club entrance, and lo and behold, she discovers that the people are no longer elegantly dressed. They're not engaged in fine dining. All of her old friends are there in rags, picking up stinking garbage, and they're in this horrible position. And that's what her job is now going to be for all eternity in hell. And she turns to the devil and she says, how could this happen? It was such a different thing when I was here the other day. And he said, that was the recruitment experience. This is the real job. That is the problem I think a lot of people suffer in this whole area, is that we have to try and make the recruitment experience in order to facilitate really hiring the best people and also facilitate not having problems in terms of the law. Make the recruitment experience really try to track the actual job experience more so that people are not misinformed. A lot of times I think job applicants make mistakes in the interviewing process that there really is no way they can somehow go to the law and expect some sort of remedy. And I'll give you some examples of what I would refer to as truly stupid behavior, problems with psychology or emotion that maybe arise, but really the law cannot recognize and deal with. And let me give you some examples of supposedly true things that have happened during job interviews, as reported by recruiters. An interviewee dozes off, and to make it even worse, he starts to snore. An interviewee shows up with a Walkman on his head, and I guess he's trying to show his versatility, that he can engage in an interview and also listen to the radio at the same time. An interviewee says, okay, my resume is a little bit skimpy, but look at these biceps, let's have an arm wrestle. An interviewee promises that he will have the corporate logo tattooed on any part of his anatomy that the interviewer chooses. An interviewee is subject to a difficult question and asks the interviewer, can I break to phone my therapist? An interviewee brings his large dog to the interview, trying to win the job, I guess, through intimidation. An interviewee shows up looking one way, then goes, excuses himself to freshen up, and comes back looking entirely different. For instance, as a bald man, I appreciate the notion you show up bald and then you come back later maybe with a toupee. An interviewee chews gum doing the interview. And maybe just to make sure everyone knows he's chewing gum, maybe he blows bubbles. An interviewee is told to relax, make yourself at home. And so when handed forms, he literally stretches out there on the floor, just sinks on the floor, stretches out to fill out the forms. Now, all of these are true behaviors, supposedly. I think these people are very likely to have not been hired, and I suspect there's really nothing they can turn to in the law to somehow remedy the situation if they think somehow they're being discriminated against. Even if they're being mistreated, even if there really were other reasons that they should have been hired, the employer can turn to those psychological factors and find, we're just not going to hire this guy. And as long as it's in a position where the calculations are somewhat subjective, and that's usually what we're talking about in higher level positions, executive type positions, it's very, very difficult to find some sort of actionable claim based on the interviewing process. You're much more likely to have that when you have lots of people coming in for entry-level positions or lower-level positions where you truly can look at large numbers and say objectively people were being treated differently. But at a higher level, those subjective calculations are part of what goes into hiring people, and it's very, very difficult for someone who wasn't hired to sue. Much, much easier to win on a claim that you were wrongly fired, you were wrongly demoted, you were wrongly not promoted, than to win on a claim that you didn't even get hired in the first place, at least when we're talking about at the higher level. And that's the real problem here when we start talking about subjective calculations. If you read the papers, you will occasionally read these silly stories of things that people have done in the interviewing process, even after they've been hired. And sometimes those are enough to cause the conditional hiring to what? To terminate. I'll give you a couple of examples. A person has just been hired, and the first thing he fires back with an email or a fax or whatever is a question, what are the zodiac signs of all the board members and their spouses? Or he just hears he's been hired and he says, will the company move not only me, but my 2-ton rock garden from California to Maryland? Or the interviewee has just been given a conditional offer and he says, in effect, well, that's all nice and dandy, but let's talk a little bit more about that severance package. I want to find out more. And so he probes, he asks question after question after question about what actually is part of this whole severance arrangement in the event of a termination. In situations like that, even though there may have been an offer on the table, I believe employers are somewhat likely to withdraw that offer, and I rather doubt that a prospective employee really has much of a claim he could make. But in the more technical area, the area evinced in the skit that you just watched, it really is difficult, and what I would say again is you really, at least at the larger employers, it behooves you to have well-trained, well-experienced, and constantly exposed to new trends personnel who keep meticulous records. That's what they need, meticulous records, and really trying to keep track of what the law is and demonstrating they're trying to follow in good faith with good ethical behavior the dictates of the law and what would be fair to prospective employees.